Hi, welcome back, everybody. Derrick Broze is with us again. He's an author, journalist, documentary filmmaker, activist whose work focuses on practical steps individuals can take to reduce their dependence on technocracy and the role of community in achieving long-term independence. Welcome back to the show. He's Derrick Broze. How are you, Derrick?
I'm doing great, Jimmy. Thanks for having me.
You wrote an article recently, that's why I wanted to have you on and cover it. Uh, it's the Venezuelan technocracy connection. The U.S. bombing of Venezuela and capture of Nicolas Maduro cannot be rationally explained as a drug enforcement operation or even solely about recovering oil. The bigger picture is technocracy. So let me just play this video quickly that you had in your article about Donald Trump, and then I'll have you lay out what he's actually saying here. Here we go.
As everyone knows, the oil business in Venezuela has been a bust, a total bust, for a long period of time. They were pumping almost nothing by comparison to what they could have been pumping and what could have taken place. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. In addition, Venezuela unilaterally seized and stole American oil, American assets, and American platforms, costing us billions and billions of dollars. They did this a while ago, but we never had a president that did anything about it. They took all of our property. It was our property. We built it. And we never had a president that decided to do anything about it. Instead, they fought wars that were 10,000 miles away. We built Venezuela oil industry with American talent, drive, and skill, and the socialist regime stole it from us during those previous administrations, and they stole it through force. This constituted one of the largest thefts of American property in the history of our country, considered the largest theft of property in the history of our country. Massive oil infrastructure was taken like we were babies, and we didn't do anything about it. I would have done something about it. America will never allow foreign powers to rob our people or drive us back into and out of our own hemisphere. That's what they did.
You said that the U.S. is going to run Venezuela. So who's in power right now?
Well, we're going to be running it with a group, and we're going to make sure it's run properly. We're going to rebuild the oil infrastructure, which will cost billions of dollars. It'll be paid for by the oil companies directly. They will be reimbursed for what they're doing, but that's going to be paid. And we're going to get the oil flowing the way it should be. As you know, it was just a minor flow. It was actually a minor flow for what they have. But we're going to run it properly, and we're going to make sure the people of Venezuela are taken care of. We're going to make sure the people that were forced out of Venezuela by this thug are also taken care of. But in terms of other countries that want oil, we're in the oil business. We're going to sell it to them. We're not going to say we're not going to give it. In other words, we'll be selling oil probably in much larger doses because they couldn't produce very much because their infrastructure was so bad. So we'll be selling large amounts of oil to other countries.
Is it possible that the U.S. ends up administrating Venezuela for years?
Well, it won't cost us anything because the money coming out of the ground is very substantial. So it's not going to cost us anything. We want safety there. We want to be surrounded by countries that aren't housing all of our enemies all over the world.
Well, it sounds to me like it's all about oil, but you tell me what it's really about, Derrick.
Yeah, he certainly does lay it on thick there and make it clear that it is about oil in some ways. And I outlined that in the article, the different connections that I know that you've touched on with Thomas Massey in the past recently, and talking about Paul Singer, the billionaire. There are billionaires who stand to benefit from the oil industry and what Trump has done there in Venezuela. But what I'm focused on in this article is to put it in the context of the technocracy movement. And I know that last time we spoke, and you've had others on your show, Whitney Webb and others, speak about the technocracy angle, the influence of people like Peter Thiel, Alex Karp, Palantir on the Trump administration. They're getting huge contracts under ICE and other areas, as well as people like Elon Musk, obviously Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg. These are the modern technocrats of today, these folks who are billionaires, almost trillionaires, who have access to all kinds of technology and who believe essentially that they should be the unelected power. And that is the core definition of what a technocrat is from the original technocrat movement back in the 1930s and 40s. It was basically a political movement in the US and Canada that said that us, the people, were too stupid to know what's good for us. The business people weren't doing a good job. This is sort of after the Depression. And they said the politicians don't know what they're doing. So the technocrats proposed that the technologists or the engineers or the experts should be the ones to micromanage and run all of society under what they called a technocracy. And they envisioned this future where there would be what they called the American technate or the North American technate, which they specifically describe as encompassing everything from Greenland, Canada, the US, Mexico, parts of Central America, the Panama Canal, and including in their own map that I included in that article from the 1940s, it shows parts of Venezuela and Colombia as part of this technate that they describe. And essentially, I believe that Trump, the reason he was elected and put into this position, and despite the MAGA thinking that he was resisting the globalists, that in many ways, as you and your audience I think are aware, he is showing he is very much aligned with them in certain areas. And so I think Trump is essentially just fulfilling the plan of Elon Musk's grandfather, Joshua Hadelman, who was a member of the technocracy movement in Canada in that time in 1930s and 40s. And this was their vision, is to create a North American technate, and this would be one of different factions around the world. It's similar to that sort of early 2000s right-wing conspiracy you may have heard about, Jimmy, back in the day, the North American Union. Well, this sure looks a lot like it. And as I point out in the article, I quote the technocrats themselves from back in the 30s and the 40s, where they specifically describe the need for the United States to take Greenland, to take parts of Venezuela, and to make it all under the control of the technocrats.
So this is, so it's kind of mind-blowing to me. This is nothing new then. So this is something that the geeks, as we call them, or the technocrats, they're called today. People like like you mentioned, Peter Thiel's. So is this like what's that guy, Curtis Yarvin? Is this like a kind of
absolutely?
Is this like a kind of a wet dream of his?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought him up, Jimmy. I have another investigation from 2025 that people can find at The Last American Vagabond. That's called Meet the Man Who Influenced Peter Thiel and J.D. Vance. And as I'm sure other guests have discussed, Curtis Yarvin, he went by the pen name Mencius Moldbug for years, writing for what he originally called the neo-reactionaries or the Dark Enlightenment, which eventually became the alt-right, the sort of early MAGA movement. And this still has been existing in the background here. And in fact, in Trump's second administration here, there's been many reports of numerous people in his cabinet who have been influenced by Curtis Yarvin. Obviously, J.D. Vance himself, he specifically said that it was that his philosophy came from Curtis Yarvin, that he credits him directly. And in fact, before the election of last year, he was telling him, he was quoting Yarvin and saying, we need to basically push Trump to make decisions and to put the Supreme Court to see if they'll actually try to enforce their rulings, and then, sort of take that gamble. Can Trump go ahead and do whatever he wants? Will the Supreme Court stop him? All of J.D. Vance's philosophy, to whatever it is influenced by Peter Thiel and Curtis Yarvin. And of course, Peter Thiel and his relationship with Curtis Yarvin has been reported for some time. So absolutely, this does relate to the neo-reactionaries, the Dark Enlightenment, Curtis Yarvin. This is just the modern version of what we would call the technocracy movement. And if I could, Jimmy, I just want to mention one other point, because people might hear 1930s, 1940s and say, okay, Derrick, this is a map from 100 years ago. What does this have to do with today? The movement and the mainstream version of events essentially kind of petered out. They didn't get a lot of public support. So by the 1950s, if you go read the Wikipedia page, for example, it says the technocracy movement disappeared. It was a failure. But actually, 20 years later, in the 1970s, Zbigniew Brzezinski, who you may be familiar with, is longtime deep state national security advisor, him along with David Rockefeller, they and Henry Kissinger, they formed the Trilateral Commission. And around that time, Zabrinsky wrote a book called The Technotronic Era, America Between Two Ages. He didn't say technocratic, he called it technotronic. But it was essentially just a revival of the same ideas. And both the original technocrats and Zbigniew Brzezinski in the Trilateral Commission, they admit in order for them to get their vision of the world, it would involve a loss of privacy, a loss of individual liberty, a loss of freedom of expression, that there would have to be almost, he kind of describes it as like a world police state in order to enforce this utopia that they promised us is going to deliver paradise. And even the original technocrat movement, they were very obsessed with the the use of energy and how to maximize efficiency. Actually, the predecessor to the technocracy movement was a movement coincidentally called the efficiency movement. And I wrote another article kind of drawing some parallels between that and Doge. And anyways, they even imagined energy credits, what we might call carbon credits today. So they said every person, every country, every individual would be allocated the exact amount of energy credits they need based on, whatever they factor, whatever the experts say. And so what we're witnessing today under Donald Trump's second administration and with all these technocrats in office, including people like Peter Thiel and Alex Karp, who are the heads of Palantir, who also happen to be steering committee members of the Bilderberg Group, including people like Larry Fink, who's the co-interim chair of the World Economic Forum, who's also a decades-long friend of Donald Trump. These people are in the White House working hand in hand with Donald Trump, and they're essentially just fulfilling a plan that goes back to at least the technocrats of 100 years ago.
So this is mind-blowing, kind of, for someone like me anyway. So this is the map you were referring to?
Yeah, that's it right there.
So when was this map drawn up?
That was released in 1940, and one of the technocrats had like monthly magazines and newsletters, and that's from the July 1940 issue.
And so this was their vision, to have everything that's in red here would be kind of under one government control or one techno state, or how?
So they called it a technate, right? And so that whole area, that geographical area would be, as it says on the map, the technate of America. And they described that, interestingly, back in their time, writing in the 1930s and 40s, they said that the technocrats would run the machines. Now, they didn't have computers as we understand them today, but definitely the earliest versions of computer technology was existing at the time. And what they called machines, we might call artificial intelligence today. And basically they said that the technocrats would be the ones to micromanage and to run the machines. And then through those machines, they would divvy up all of the resources using something that's essentially universal basic income. And they said at the top of this technate would sit the techno king, the technocrat king. And that happens to be a nickname that Elon Musk has given himself. Actually, if you go look at the original Tesla bio for Elon, he puts on there, he calls himself the techno king. So they said that at the top of this, there would be a technocrat king that sort of ran things, but they promise it would be, all fair and resources would be allocated perfectly, and it would be better for finances, for resources, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, this is the original plan that, again, I think is just what we're seeing unfold right before our eyes. And, even to talk about that map right there. So what it's showing at the bottom there, the tip of South America, you have Western Venezuela and Northern Venezuela, but you also have Eastern Colombia too. And you may have seen in the news, Trump has been talking a lot of crap to Colombia as well, threatening them, and apparently had a call with the Colombian president recently. And, they've now come to terms, and, he's going to help do some deals with Trump. I think that everything we're seeing, and again, including the Panama section, because BlackRock, through Larry Fink, they bought 2 ports in Panama last year. They specifically said they consulted with Trump before they did it. I think all these pieces that are being put into place, yes, it's about oil. Yes, it could be about resources. Sure, it could be about China and Russia, all those kind of reasons they're telling us. But it also just seems to coincidentally fit with this plan of the Technate of America, which was proposed by technocrats 90 years ago. And Trump is basically working with those people. So I don't really see how. I think it's at least something that deserves our attention. And I heard what you were saying with Thomas Massey and sort of the befuddlement that a lot of people have with watching Trump sell out his own base and his own movement. And it is my belief that this has all been kind of game the whole time. And when the election was happening last year, I was warning people about the Zionist and technocrat connections surrounding Trump, and kind of warning, but also hoping I was wrong, that this is exactly what we would see. And I think from day one, whether you're talking about the Stargate project or any number of other things Trump's done in the last year, it's becoming clear that he is working with these people. He is not getting rid of the Bilderbergers and the WEFs and the young global leaders. He's working with them directly, even if he talks a big game, in front of the cameras.
Do you find it as stunning as I do that a big part of his following, who are specifically opposed to everything you just said, the globalists, the WEF, the techno-feudal lords, the whole, that they're just going along with them blindly as if you're supposed to be loyal to Trump no matter what he does, even if he does the exact opposite of what they wanted him to do? I'm actually shocked. Yeah,
well, I wish I could say I was shocked. I mean, obviously it's demoralizing, Jimmy. I mean, I've been called black-pilled and negative and liar, all the sorts of names in the book, because MAGA, I will credit those who have woken up, and I've talked to many people who said, look, I voted for Trump 3 times, but I can't believe what he's doing. So it seems like some of the base is definitely recognizing and seeing these things, but you're correct. There are definitely quite a bit of people who I think they'd never understood from the beginning that it's supposed to be about principles, not party or not a person. So if you have principles, whether that's America first or whatever it may be, you stick with those principles. And if the person you supported who claimed to uphold those principles sells them out and literally does the exact opposite, you don't hold on to the person, you hold on to the principle, you get rid of the party, you get rid of the person, and you stick to your principles because you know that's what's right. And unfortunately, we live in a world in the political realm where there's a huge lack of principles among the politicians, of course, but they unfortunately get lots of their followers to abandon their principles as well. And I think that's just, it's kind of an underlying issue in all of our, all of our political world here, is that people need to recognize that, at least in my view, that I don't think any of these parties, any of these individuals, whoever pops up next, even if it's Massey, he's a great guy. If he runs in 2028 or 2032, I don't think the political system can be saved when both sides are clearly working together in order to bring about these generations-old plans. It doesn't mean things are hopeless, but I do think we need to start looking elsewhere besides failed politics.
I mean, Steve Bannon was on my show before the election. I'm pretty sure it was before the election, and he talked about how he's against these techno-feudal lords, meaning people like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, thinking that they're going to install this techno-feudalism. And so I thought, well, good. There's a big, former Trump #1 advisor. He's got a big platform. He's got a lot of influence. So is he really pushing back on this stuff, or is he? What did you make? What do you make of him saying that?
Yeah, Bannon's an interesting character. You're correct that he has been, at least in the beginning of Trump's second term, very vocally against Zuckerberg, against Musk, and some of these other people. And I think actually makes a pretty good right-wing MAGA sort of class argument about why there's problems associated with them. But I don't know how effective he really is when we have these paid influencers on Twitter, X, and elsewhere who, no matter what Donald Trump says, Benny Johnson, many other people will just repeat it as it's the greatest thing that's ever happened. I think that's a big problem. And then in terms of Bannon, I think somebody needs to ask him about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
You're saying what was that last part? Someone should ask him.
Someone should ask him about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, Bannon. I mean,
we brought it up when we had him on our show, and we asked him when is he going to release, because I guess he's got like hours and hours of he was doing a documentary on Jeffrey Epstein, I guess, and he had never released it, and it's got hours. And so we asked him when he was going to release it, and I forget what he said. He said it came down to basically I'm working on it. But I don't think we'll ever see that.
Yeah, we'll see.
Do you think we'll ever see that?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know when you interviewed him and asked him about that, but even in the more recent document releases in the last couple months, there's been more emails between him and Jeffrey Epstein. Nothing that says he was involved in anything illegal, but it does seem like he had a closer relationship, and maybe it was just in pursuit of the documentary you mentioned. But some of them, they seem to be pretty chummy.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, this is quite an article. It's quite a revelation to me. And so to think that they were thinking about this stuff, back in the 40s. And of course, I was talking the other day with Kurt on the show, and I was talking about how it feels like we're living in 1984, and how did George Orwell was such a philosopher. And he said he wasn't a philosopher. He didn't have a predictive gift. He was hanging out with the people who were talking about doing all the things that they're doing. And I'm like, and so here this is, and it made me think of what Kurt said. Like, oh my God, they were all thinking about this kind of stuff. They were all talking about all this kind of stuff. He was just listening to them and put it in a book.
Absolutely.
And this is more proof of that Kurt was correct about that. And so,
yeah, and if I just invite people just real quick, Jimmy, if people want to know more about that history, that background, I encourage people to check out my free documentary series called The Pyramid of Power. It's 17 parts, and it goes into kind of everything we described here, but obviously in a bit more detail. People can find that at thepyramidofpower.net. Okay,
everybody check that out. And so, and the reason why, why did they stop there at Venezuela and Colombia? Why there?
Well, I think that the writers, because the movement was mainly based in the United States and Canada, they were still thinking from a American Western kind of centric lens, but they did in their own writings, they did believe that it would be positive for other leaders of the world to form their own technates. And so this is just the North American technate, but they did imagine that if the movement spread and other people saw value in their ideas, that there would be a European technate, there might be an East Asian technate, African technate, things like that. And again, it just sounds very familiar from, obviously we have the European Union, there's the African Union, there's been this theorized conspiracy theory about the North American Union for years that many people like Alex Jones used to warn against, but unfortunately there's quite a bit of people, again, in MAGA media who are promoting this and acting as if it's a positive thing.
This is the exact thing that Trump supporters were against. And now
About
that
a year ago, huh?
now that Trump's doing it, a lot of them, but also many of them are not going, like you said. I meet lots of them that aren't going along, and they're very disappointed in Donald Trump, and as they should be. This you could have got this with anybody. It didn't matter who you voted for, and no matter who you vote for, you get John McCain, and this is proof. Here it is. Wow, that's quite a map. All right, Derrick, I appreciate that. His article's up at the Vanguard, and you can check out his Pyramid of Power series, and also his book, A Man of My Word, How I Overcame Addiction, Depression, and Mental and Physical Prison. So everybody check that out. Derrick, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Jimmy. Appreciate you.
Okay, over to Steph.
Okay, did you check out the pyramidofpower.net, ladies and gentlemen? I put the link there for you, doing it one more time. Always good to have Derrick on the show. He brings that article, if you get a chance to read the article, and all the names, all the technocrats. I mean, when I saw Donald Trump in the White House and he had all the technocrats sitting around him, it was like, those are the people that are sitting around. Ugh.
Right?
Yeah, Bill Gates, Zuckerberg, I don't know if Karp was there or Theo was there, just like all these, technocrats that obviously have influence